Hi, and welcome to Manned Up Conversations, where we connect with evolving men to discuss issues around masculinity and manhood, and also provide tools to help us be better for our society. Peace and love, family. Now, in this episode, I connect with Baltimore native David C. Miller, who uses his academic training and innate street skills to lead healing circles with men and boys, focusing on decision-making, impulse control, mental health awareness, and managing anger. His work with black men and boys has appeared on the BBC magazine, on the CNN, on the Huffington Post, on USA Today, the Baltimore Sun, and various other media outlets. So it's quite a pleasure to have him here on Manned Up Conversations. So Miller's work includes being an author and an architect of Dare to be King, What If the Prince Lives, which is a unique curriculum designed to engage young males of color around 3 domains, namely anger, decision-making, and impulse control. He completed his PhD in the School of Social Work at Morgan State University, where his dissertation research focused on the emotional connections between black fathers and their daughters, which we'll explore in more detail in this episode. Okay, man, Mr. Miller. So I don't even, you have such a brotherly approach that to even call you Mr. Miller feels a bit awkward. Because when I met you, I was like, man, I'm meeting a professor here, so I better be all suited up and looking professional. Right. And this man comes through in sweats and just keeping it easy, keeping it casual. And yeah, man, you made me feel right at home. So I'm very honored to have this conversation with you today.
Thank you. I'm a real low key kind of guy, man. I'm not like, I don't know how it is in South Africa, but I know in the United States, when you achieve when you get a doctorate degree, a PhD, everybody, the expectation is that everybody will call you doctor. And I'm just not that kind of guy, man. Like, I don't have little kids call me doctor. I mean, I'll tell them that I've achieved, a PhD, because in the United States, in the United States, only about 2% of the population has a PhD. 3% of the population has a PhD, and it's even less for people that look like us. So I'll share with students that, even though I failed all my classes in school when I was younger and didn't do well in school, I was able to get it together and achieved, a PhD. But I don't walk around making people call me professor or doctor. I'm a community person, man. I always want to be able to relate to people regardless of their background.
Yes, sir. Man, that's David President right there. That's a type of mentality we need from our leaders, right? Don't look at me as this person who's outside of the community, like I'm part of you, Right. So I love call it the humility that you kind of approach that with. But yeah, today we're going to talk about something very interesting that maybe not a lot of us consider especially when you're planning family and that type of thing. I know in one of your articles that you wrote, you said, as a black father of 2 daughters, you've wondered why so little attention has been given to the special relationship between black fathers and their daughters. Because if you ask any committed father who's raising a daughter about his fatherhood journey, and instantly the conversation elicits a range of emotions, a robust smile, and in many instances, we speak about tears as well. So that's a wide range of emotions, as you explained it. But what does that mean to you?
So I think as black fathers, particularly of African descent, you being in South Africa, me being in the United States, I think we all have a very unique fatherhood journey and fatherhood experience. And I hope through meeting you and some of the work that I've been doing in Ghana for a couple of years, that we can kind of bridge the gap and connect the dots and really begin to have more robust conversations about our fatherhood journey. One of the things that I think often happens is fathers, particularly black fathers of African descent, our role as fathers is marginalized, regardless of where we find ourselves. You could be a black father in Germany. You could be a black father living in India. I think our role as fathers is often minimized. And when we specifically think about fathers, we often hear about fathers and sons, the important relationship between fathers and sons. You often see commercials in the US, you see commercials of dads out tossing a ball with their son, but you don't see similar commercials with dads having a tea party, having a tea party with like maybe imaginary characters with their daughters. Yeah. And so what I wanted to do with both my academic research at the university level, as well as the work that I just do in communities with men, is to really uplift the relationship between fathers and daughters and the dynamics of those relationships, whether you're a dad who has daughters and married, whether you're a single dad raising daughters, you could be what we call in the States as a non-residential or non-custodial father, where you may have a daughter, but she doesn't live with you. There are a lot of different kinds of configurations. We want dads to understand that that relationship is critically important. Yeah. And that there's some things that we know. For example, really quickly, we know that when a father is involved, when a father has a healthy relationship with his daughter, it increases the likelihood that she will do better in school. So we know that it increases the likelihood that our daughters will do well in school, because most dads are going to be serious about education.
Yes, sir.
We know that when dads have a healthy relationship with their daughters, daughters tend to have more healthy romantic relationships. So in my research, I interviewed fathers and daughters. The daughters were over 18 years of age. So I interviewed daughters who were as young as 20 and as old as 46. Wow. And each of them talked about how having their dad in their life, even though there were periods where it might have been difficult because of the relationship with mom, that they learned a lot about dating, intimacy, sex, and relationships from not only talking to their dads, but watching how their dads, interacted with other women. So we know in terms of romantic relationships, when dad is involved, daughters tend to do well as it relates to romantic relationships. Really quickly, we also know that when dad is absent or not involved or doesn't have a healthy relationship with his daughters, they're more likely to be involved in risky behavior at early ages, smoking weed, drinking, having sex. At an early age, because of the lack of healthy bond between, dads and daughters. We also know that when dad is not involved, it increases the likelihood for mental health challenges, anxiety, and depression. And so I think it's really important that we make this case how super important dads are in the lives of their daughters.
Oh, man. And that's such a crucial, you said so many crucial points in that. There's a campaign going on in South Africa right now that Heartlines, through their Fathers Matter campaign, or call it the division of Heartlines, where they're talking about, Daddy, do my hair, right, as a way for fathers and daughters to connect. And Black women especially are so sensitive about their hair. So that kind of gives, that I'm trusting you with something that I'm so sensitive about, and we can then bond over that, right? And it's interesting to also see how the dads also kind of react to doing their daughter's hair. In most cases, the first time you get to do a lady's hair is probably maybe putting some oil on your girlfriend or your wife's scalp, just to like loosen up the braids, whatever the case is. But we don't do that for our daughters. So what are some of the methods that you've kind of explored with the two daughters that you have that's kind of, bridge that gap for you between, that difference of male and female?
So, man, again, some of my fondest, my daughters are young adults now. My youngest daughter, and I was just texting her, she just texted me for some money, like maybe 15 minutes before this call. She's in her second year of college, and then my oldest daughter is 27. I remember doing their hair when they were younger. Now they don't won't let me do their hair now.
Yeah.
They won't even let me touch their hair now as young adults. But that was a great bonding moment. And I'm actually working on a children's book. I also write children's books. While I was in South Africa, I did a book signing. Here's one of my children's books. I did a book signing in a school in Johannesburg, an elementary school. One of the new books that I have coming out is going to be about a dad who does his daughter's hair, because that's such a pivotal bonding moment. Because one, it's an opportunity for dad and daughter to have just some intimate time together. But then it's also an opportunity for dad to kind of learn what hairstyles his daughter might like, even if you can't do all of the hairstyles that she might ask. It helps dad learn what kind of hair brushes, what kind of oils or grease to use. So it's a time for fun, it's a time for bonding, but it's also a really important learning moment for dads in terms of learning how important, as you indicated, the daddy-daughter hair experience, the daddy-daughter shopping experience is also one that I constantly remember, because a lot of times I remember taking my daughter shopping, and they're 8 and 9 years old, and in a lot of the clothing stores here in the U.S., they making clothes for 8 and 9-year-olds that they would make for a stripper. I mean, the clothes that they want little girls to wear, we're not buying that. I don't care if somebody else wears it. I don't care if one of your friends at school wears it. We're not wearing it. So just having these conversations and reinforcing these conversations. Well, those jeans are too tight. I'm not buying those jeans. And just reinforcing conversations about makeup. Yes, when is it appropriate for you to wear makeup, and how much makeup? At what age? With my daughters, particularly my youngest daughter, at what age should you get a cell phone? And the dangers of social media. Those are really important times, for the daddy-daughter conversations. And then even now with my baby girl in college, like in terms of music, hip hop, what are you listening to? Well, what do you like about, say, Lil Wayne? What do you think about his lyrics? How do you feel when you watch the video and you see these half-naked women on the video dancing? What does that say about womanhood? Right? What does that say about manhood? So, even as they're older, because one of the things that the daughters that I interviewed said in my research is that they need their daddies more now at 25, at 26, and at 30 than they needed when they were 18. Wow. So this relationship between dads and daughters it's a lifespan. It doesn't end when your daughter turns 35. And even when she gets married, the relationship between dads and daughters don't end.
Man. And I love what you said there, about sort of that media literacy, because I'm in the space myself, there's a lot of conversation going on right now about, the type of role models that the youth is being exposed to, right? The type of celebrity that they're being exposed to, and just the impact of that. I mean, if you think about, random example, the Megan Thee Stallions, and you're talking about a sort of dance or type of dress they wear. And some women would say that, yeah, but we're being liberal right now, right? And you being an old school father right now, you're stopping us from sort of exploring and living in the time. And I see you shaking your head already. How do you then sort of navigate that, putting your foot down instead of being that drill sergeant father, drawing that line between I'm not a drill sergeant, I'm your dad, who's, demands a level of respect, and that same respect that I want you to kind of put it on yourself, right?
Yeah, and for me, I think those valuable, critical lessons and courageous conversations begin when they're younger, around what's appropriate and what's not appropriate, and what I'm not buying and what I will allow in my house. I believe in freedom of expression. I believe in the liberation of Black women, I believe that Black women all over the globe, in Africa and Latin America, in Europe, have been mistreated by men. But at the same time, I think we got to have a conversation around what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. To me, coming outside half clothed, half dressed is just not appropriate. Man. And I think those are the conversations that we got to have with our daughters when they're younger. So when they get older, they can kind of understand what is appropriate and what is not appropriate. So for example, a lot of the stuff that you may see Megan Thee Stallion wear, like fishnet stockings or a real short skirt. If you work, and let's say your daughter's 25 or 30 years old and works at a bank, they're not gonna let her come. They're not gonna let her come to work like that. And the reason why they're not gonna let her come to work like that, or it will be frowned upon for that kind of dress, an 8 to 10 inch or 12 inch high heel shoe, is that's not appropriate for the workplace. Now, if you go into a nightclub and that's what you want to do, that's fine, but it's not appropriate to wear on a college campus. It's not appropriate to wear in a work setting. And so again, I think that those kinds of, and it's not being a drill sergeant, it's being able to present your argument. Yes, sir. And then stepping back and letting your daughter, even if she is 10 or 11 or 12 years old, present her argument so that she has a voice. Particularly when we think about Black girls, oftentimes they're silent. And so we want them to have a voice, but also at 8 and 10 and 12 years old, they don't really know a lot about society and the world yet. So that's why dads have to come in and help make some decisions around what you will wear and what you won't wear.
Oh, I love that, man. Because that also impacts on the relationships, as you said a bit earlier on, right? The relationships they get into or the type of men they attract with. Obviously, whatever you wear attracts a certain type of individual. And then going back to what you're saying about giving them a voice and women being silenced, or our daughters being silenced for that matter, how does that sort of translate? Now, one thing that I get a lot is, we just doing our thing. We talking, we liberal. That's probably the most discussed thing around the freedom of speech or the freedom of whatever I want to wear, wherever I want to go, right? But how do you draw the distinction between, okay, she's now kind of just expressing, and okay, now that's a little bit disrespectful. You getting out of hand there. This is now when daddy needs to now step in. What does that look like, Yeah,
I mean, once again, man, that's why we're always encouraging dads to develop these deeper emotional relationships. It's kind of hard to have this kind of conversation with your daughter when you've been absent or you guys don't have a deep emotional connection, and or if maybe the daughter doesn't respect dad because dad hasn't been living the kind of life that he should be living, right? We also, one of the things that dads do that is often not necessarily discussed, but we teach our daughters how to navigate society. So we teach our daughters what to do when they leave our house. We teach our daughters, for example, I'm always saying to my daughters, when you're out, you shouldn't be walking down the street talking on your phone. You have to pay attention. A lot of times women are attacked, particularly in the US. I don't know about South Africa, but women, particularly Black women, are attacked at high levels, great frequency. And a lot of times it's, because they're just out, many times they may not be paying attention. There are times when women are attacked because of how they are dressed. So all of that is part of this deeper, more critical conversation that we got to have with girls and women, because we live a lot of times, the reality is we're living in very dangerous times.
Sure.
And again, I don't know about South Africa, but Black women are attacked every single day in America.
We have the same problem here. I think rape is quite high up in South Africa,
Oh,
and
wow. Okay.
as you said, it's partly, for various reasons, like the way you dress, sort of places that you party in without paying too much attention. So it's almost like there's no self-defense or self-preservation being taught to daughters, right? And we can trace that back to exactly what you were saying, that maybe the father is not present. He's not sharing those type of life skills, because we believe that only boys are meant to be taught to defend themselves, right? Or only boys need to be taught about the dangers of the streets and then that type of thing. And for girls, it's like, they should just stay home, stay in the kitchen. And that's when I think I love your approach of sort of not looking at the children as boy and girl, but these are my children who I'm going to impart certain skills and tools to, so that they can survive and thrive in this world. Because like you said, it's a dangerous time and a dangerous world to be in right now.
And it also speaks to some of the work that we need to do with men and boys. I have a colleague here in the US who runs a program called, and when you get a chance, I want you to look it up. It's called Men Can Stop Rape. And so they do programming with boys, middle school boys, around, no means no, and helping these boys understand that you just can't put your hands on girls and women. So the work we do with boys and girls, and the work that we do with adult men and adult women is just super important in terms of raising healthy daughters and raising healthy sons.
Man. And there's this idea that I always hear that, women are now being empowered, or the young daughters are being empowered, and the boys are being left behind now. So to speak, it's like, well, what's going to happen when these men or these boys grow up to be men and they meet these empowered women, but they being left behind? Do you think that even, is there some validity to that?
I mean, when in the U.S., when you look at the data on Black men and Black women in terms of education and in terms of employment or wages, you find that a lot of Black women are doing extremely well, tend to earn college degrees faster than Black men, tend to buy houses faster than Black men. So again, for me, I try not to follow that line of thinking. For me, it's how do we empower both Black men and women, and how do we create opportunities for both Black men and Black women so that we can produce healthy, stable families?
Yes, sir. Because at the end of the day, it is about the family, right? It's less about the individual. Yeah.
It's about the family.
I love that, man. And do you think we're doing enough of sort of planning towards like a family planning, so to speak? We spoke about this a bit earlier, that, a lot of us, I think we spoke with a gentleman who's a lot more senior than I am. And he said that, KG, when we were growing up, we planned. I knew when I approached a lady that I'm planning to get married. I want to have kids with her. There's a whole plan in mind. But it seems like for you guys, you just like in it for the fun of it, I suppose. There's no planning, there's no long-term ambition for that relationship. So how do you think that then translates to this conversation of then,
Well, I also think that mass media, music, which would include hip hop, R&B, other forms of music, and then social media, I think generations are being shaped by mass media to believe that it's okay to just hook up. It's okay to just be free and wild. And you can think about families at some other time. And what ends up happening is people are dating, people are having sex, people are having babies. The baby wasn't part of the plan. And so a lot of it is the messaging. We don't see a lot of messaging around planning a family. We don't see a lot of messaging around, like you talk to young folks about dating. Like when I was growing up, when you were dating a young lady, you had to go to the young lady's house, and you even needed to meet her father if he was present, grandfather if he was there, or there may be a significant man who was connected to the family through church, or he might have been a next door neighbor, because the family wanted to know your intentions with their daughter.
Yeah.
We're in a space now where a guy just pull up to your house, honk the horn, and your daughter will go outside and get in the car.
Right.
And will never meet. They don't meet until you find out the girl is pregnant. And so when we talk about family values, when we talk about this kind of transmission of values from one generation to the next, again, one of the reasons why we see a lot of the challenges with young people is because of the challenges with adults. I always tell people that we don't have an adult. I mean, we don't have a youth problem. People want to blame young people. I blame the adults.
Sure. Because they didn't pass on, like you're saying, those values, right?
Right.
And it's both. I think it's more than just about, no, the fathers didn't do it. I think it lies on both the parents, like the father and the mother, right? But then we so often hear about sort of the lack of fatherhood as that gets the most blame. And you know, I sit on the fence with that sometimes, because I grew up without my father. I was raised by my mother for the most part. And although I had my challenges with academics and different things, I still think I still managed to maintain somewhat of good character. I'm respectful, I'm kind to people and that type of thing. But those values, even for guys who are raised by fathers, they seem so kind of obsolete now. It's like, but that's not the way society is moving. Right. And like you're saying, it's all of the mass media and the languaging, more specifically around how we talk about, marriage, for example. Even in our friends, friends of ours who are married don't paint, I don't want to say a rosy picture, but they don't give us the best kind of advice when it comes to marriages, and that is to a detriment to all of us, because then I'm thinking, man, if he's going through that, we even use Will Smith, for example. I'm in South Africa. I have no idea what Will Smith's life and Jada Pinkett is like. But here I am talking about, man, if Will Smith can't get it together, then who the hell is KG thinking he's going to get married?
That's a good point. That's a good point. No, that's a really good point. I do and have done workshops with younger boys, 12, 13 years old, around dating, relationships, and marriage. And even at 13, the boys will tell me that they don't want to get married because they either don't know people who are married, or what they've seen about marriage doesn't suggest that would be something that they would like to do as they get older. Yeah, so we got a lot of work to do, man.
Yes, sir. And tell me about the disrespect of fathers now. There's also this, and what I'm liking about the sort of generation that I'm seeing now, there are a lot of, maybe not so much formal and very well researched platforms that are popping up in terms of supporting young fathers or new fathers. Let me say that. There's a guy I know we had on the podcast throughout the week, and he did that every Friday. Suddenly, other guys started posting the same thing and called it Fatherhood Fridays, right? And then it became this sort of movement of men displaying how they are there for their daughters or their sons or for their child, actually. Yeah. And that's like, okay, well, that's positive, right? We need more of that. But then again, at the same time, other people look at that and like, but, look at these guys. They think they're better than us here. There's this sort of disrespect amongst men that's very unspoken, but it's very much there, So did you experience that in your time growing up? Is it something that's always been there, or is it like a new thing?
Growing up, as a dad, as a new dad, throughout my fatherhood journey, and I think what's happening is dads are starting to create this counter narrative that we are involved. Because a lot of times what happens is mothers will say that they're single mothers and that they're raising these children by themselves when that's not necessarily the case. They're not necessarily single, and they're not necessarily, they may be single, meaning that they're not married, but they're not necessarily raising the children by themselves, but that's what they say, which suggests that the dad is not involved. So there's a lot of negative information that comes out about dads, and there are a lot of assumptions that dads, because if dad and mom are not together, a lot of times people believe that the dad is not involved. So when you see these movements, when you see videos, when you see websites pop up, that kind of provides a new narrative or counter narrative, which really helps, dads, particularly Black dads, exercise our voice. We are here. We are involved. You may not necessarily see us. A lot of times we might be working. We might be working 2 jobs. We're getting our children on the weekends. There was a major study in the U.S. that came out through Health and Human Services that said Black fathers were more involved in their children's lives than fathers of other races.
Wow.
But most people in the U.S. continue to talk about absent Black fathers. Now, are there absent Black fathers? Yes. Are there a lot of absent Black fathers in the U.S.? Yes, but the majority of Black fathers may not be married to mom, may not live with mom, but they are taking care of their children. Yeah.
And I mean, that then takes us back to the family part then. I'm seeing a lot more sort of co-parenting relationships as opposed to like the sort of nuclear family, right? We marry, we stay in a home all together. So how does that now sort of impact? And more so on, I guess, for guys, we could say that, yeah, your dad will kind of have the conversation with you one day. A lot of stuff for guys happens much later for some reason. But then for the daughters, I think that now throws a bit more confusing signals, right? So because I'm thinking, okay, well, if they co-parenting, then how do I then go about choosing a mate? How do I then go about settling? How do I go about deciding if that's even the way for me to go? You'll never know it, but until we talk about what really happened, then they'll never get that. So how does that even conversation take place for co-parents?
Co-parenting is extremely difficult. It takes a great deal of maturity and healing, because oftentimes one parent feels wronged by the other parent. And because they feel that they have been wronged, there's some healing that needs to occur. And then the reality is that, and this is one of the reasons why we got to do a better job of going back to planning and selecting partners.
Yes.
Because, there's just a lot of, it could be a woman or the man who are like, well, if you're not going to be with me anymore, I'm going to make your life a living hell. And I don't care that my children are caught up in the mix. But the co-parenting requires great maturity, high levels of forgiveness, high levels of healing. And it really speaks to the work that we need to do with kind of the younger folks around, well, brother, you selected her because she's attractive. But how does she handle conflict?
Right.
How does she act when she gets mad? Because that is going to be a precursor to give you an understanding of what's going to happen if you have a child with her and y'all no longer together. She breaking up and throwing stuff now, and y'all not even married, and y'all don't have a child. She talking about burning your clothes now. What do you think is going to happen when y'all have a child together?
Man. So that's sort of like that I don't want to call it emotional training, but we say for boys, right, is, you know, that rough and tumble that you kind of have with your father, that kind of teaches you your limits, so to speak. So is that the same for daughters? Do we need to sort of rough them up a little just to see what the emotional or physical threshold is? You know, because then I don't even, you know, I don't have sisters. So, the closest I have to a woman is my mother. So excuse me for sounding a bit ignorant, but I don't know how to handle, that type of thing.
No, yeah. Great question. I was not as rough with my daughters. Like when they were young, they would love for me to pick them up and kind of throw them in the air and catch them. But for our daughters, I think it's more role modeling,
yes, sir,
and more communication. Particularly around emotions, being able to help them identify, label, and discuss their emotions. Okay, so you're upset because the little girl who you sit next to in class doesn't want to be your friend anymore. Why are you upset? What could be done to resolve the relationship between you and this other little girl? Helping them even understand at a very early age that y'all were friends for 2 years. The friendship ran its course. Who knows? Maybe in third grade, y'all might be friends again. But having those age appropriate conversations with them to begin to start talking about emotions at 7 or 8 years old, not waiting until they're 18. To have these conversations about emotions. Super important.
Super important. I love that. The age appropriateness, man. I love that. I think that's one of the things that, maybe we don't look at that, right? It's man, I'm raising someone. Let me just like feed all of this information. More so, there's the internet. So they're most likely to bump into any kind of information, and you kind of have to act as a filter, so to speak. But I want to go back to something now that, what about a man who grows up with the mentality of, these women are too emotional, right? These women are always, throwing our hands. You know how a lot of, let me not generalize here, but there's a group of men who kind of feel like women are overly emotional, and they might be right, they might be wrong. But if a father grows up with that mentality, then how do you get to unlearn, or what can you do to kind of unlearn that thinking? Because that's going to have a huge impact on how you train or you kind of teach emotional literacy to your daughter, right?
Well, the men have to be receptive, and men who think that women in general tend to be too emotional, those men will find themselves by themselves. Because women tend to be emotional creatures. And I think that there is a balance. Like my youngest daughter is very sensitive, right? Well, both my daughters are very sensitive. So, and I can be very aggressive. I grew up on the west side in a city called Baltimore. So I grew up in a tough city, witnessed a lot of gun violence and people, friends of mine going to jail. So I have a very different orientation to the world. But when I'm talking to my daughters or my wife, the softer side has to come out. I got to be more patient. And I think that those are things that men can learn, but men have to be receptive and willing to learn. But again, I think it starts with when we are boys.
Yes, sir.
How to interact with girls. Understanding that girls tend to be, not in all cases, but girls tend to be more emotional than men and boys. There's some serious work that we need to do to prepare boys for what we call authentic manhood.
Oof. Let's talk about that a bit more. So how do you define authentic manhood?
We have an entire definition when we look at authentic manhood. This is the curriculum, if you can see this. This is the curriculum that I wrote to engage boys. It's called Dare to be King. What if the Prince lives? And it's a curriculum designed to teach, train, and engage boys around healthy decision-making and emotions.
Yes, sir.
Because what happens is many of the things that you get in this curriculum You should get from your father, you should get from your father and your grandfather, and those men got it from other men in their families. And then there are things that you should have gotten from, moms and grandmoms and other women in your life. But too many children grow up without that. So now we got to teach this. So we teach schools, community centers, churches use it. We have to teach them how to manage their anger so that they don't self-destruct. A lot of the young men in the U.S. end up going to prison or jail because of their inability to manage their emotions. Me and you get into an argument. I don't like the way that you talk to me. You're bigger than me. So I go home and get a knife or a gun, come back to the basketball court, and then I shoot you.
Man.
Those are skills. Those are skills. So the rates of violence in the U.S. are off the charts. And the ages and it's mostly young men. The ages of the young men, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old that are shooting people.
Man.
And so we got to start working with them at first and second grade, third grade, managing emotions. What does it mean to be angry? What does it mean to be angry? What do you do with that anger? Right? Teaching them how to communicate, because we spend so much time on these phones that we don't even know how to communicate.
Sir.
Even something as simple as, KG, you hurt my feelings. I'm upset because you said something to me that I thought was disrespectful. How can we have a conversation, 2 8-year-olds, if we were 8 years old, how can we have be 8, 9, or 10 years old and have a conversation about you hurting my feelings without us fighting? So that's an emotional vocabulary, and that's language that we got to teach.
Oh man, that's absolutely beautiful. And I'm listening to that now. I'm like, man, I wish I received that kind of training, because I'm witnessing as well in maybe not so much in our generation. Of course, we had guys who went a bit left, but more so the generation now, and it's the violence is way higher. Like you're saying, maybe not so much knives, but gun violence is so much higher here in South Africa as well. And it's growing every other day, So that need to sort of manage and control your impulses is ever more important, right? And that same teaching for daughters now, because there's a thing that we mentioned the other day that, when we're sitting as men, depending, or as boys, depending on your level of management, right? When it comes to these issues, we know when someone is getting a little bit too close to me right now, and I'm feeling some kind of, okay, I need to either back up or this person needs to give me a bit of space, right? So how that's kind of, it's combat in a way, right? Preparing yourself, and your body knows that, okay, we're about to get physical now. But guys would say that, ladies don't know when to kind of cut it, So then it's then kind of almost the man's responsibility to kind of then know that, okay, this woman's getting a little bit too much in my face now. I'm not going to engage in that. I'm either going to start walking away. But I think it's equally, we need to train that to women or our daughters from that early age. Yes, sir.
Yeah, you don't jump in any man's face. You don't be yelling and screaming at no man. It's just not appropriate. If you're that upset because he did something to you, remove yourself from the situation.
And I mean, that's for some people it's easier said than done, right?
True.
Man, I've seen some reckless behavior out there, and it just seems to be getting worse. And it's because of the issues that we've been talking about, just the parents not really taking that responsibility. But the other part that we talk about is now social. We can go to social fatherhood. I don't know if you can call it social parenting as well, that, you are an aunt or someone not even related to that person. But when you see, a lady in the streets acting unladylike, I think you then within your rights to then say that, hey, listen, We don't talk like that. We don't do stuff like that. But at the same time, you have the parents who are like, hey, don't talk to my daughter like that. Don't talk, you know what I mean? Because they don't have those values in their family.
And it can be dangerous, but I consider myself to be a village dad. And so when I see young people doing something, I'm going to gauge to see what I believe the level of danger is for me. And then usually I will say something to them. Right. But, we got to say something. It can be difficult. A lot of these young people carrying guns. So it can be difficult. But I also think it's the way that we approach them and is what we say. Like, let me give an example. I was in a store and the little guy standing behind me had smoked so much marijuana that it smelled like he had taken a bath in it.
Man.
And I said to him, man, that weed, man, is strong, brother. And he laughed because he high. And I was like, brother, man, don't try not to come into a store or be outside when you this high, because you're asking for somebody to call the police on you. And they walk up to you, they smell you, you might have some bags of weed on you. They're gonna arrest you, young blood. And then I just moved away. And I'm hoping that because I was polite, I was super respectful, and I was just trying to drop a little bit of knowledge on him real quick, and maybe he'll think about it. Who knows?
That reminds me of a scene in Belly. Now, I often refer to hip hop a lot because I know and that's maybe my generation. Maybe you know about Belly. Obviously, you from the States.
Oh, yeah, classic.
Yeah, there's that scene where Nas goes on to, I forgot, it's Shorty Wop or something, and they're sitting on a bench and he's smoking. He's telling him about, man, you need to stop living this kind of life. And that's, although they're smoking weed together and that type of thing, but it's such a great moment, because it shows that there are men like that, right? And we need more men like that, more in community. The reason I say that is I have these neighbors. I had been away from home for some time. I was staying in Joburg, and then I moved back to Pretoria. And suddenly when I come back, man, I see these boys, 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, they're smoking weed, right? And it's every single one of them has got their own joint. I'm like, yeah, sure. I know a couple of guys on a street who smoke, but I've never seen them do it so explicitly, right? So I say to my folks that, man, I'm going to go ahead and talk to these boys. And they're like, no, don't do that, man. They might just get violent. I was like, well, why would you guys be scared to address these young boys? So there's this also fear of the youth now because of the things you mentioned, weapons, the violent sort of outrage or the anger that they hold. So I really love what you're doing in terms of being the village dad, and I just wish more men and women would kind of take on that role, man, to kind of uplift the communities, because we need parents.
Yeah, it's critically important, and I think, like you, I'm a product of hip hop, even though I'm older than you, listen to hip hop, written about hip hop. And I'm really acutely aware of how to talk to young people. I know how to talk to young people, even if they got a gun on them. I know how to talk to them in a way where I'm not disrespectful, but at the same time, I can maybe get them to stop doing something that they may be involved in that may be dangerous. But you're right. People are afraid of young people all over the world, man. And the young people know that we are afraid of them. Like, I just saw some video on Instagram in Philadelphia, and I was just in Philadelphia last weekend. It's a video on Instagram that I'm gonna send you. Cars are coming down the street, and it's about 20 young people, high school age. They are standing in front of the cars, blocking the streets, and then they just start jumping on the hoods of the car.
Yeah, I've seen a few of those. In Chicago, I think, right?
Yeah. They do that because they know we are afraid of them. Yeah. So we got work to do, man. We got, and my work is really around getting fathers to play a larger role, not only in family, but also in community.
Man, that's so powerful, man. So now I want to move on to some of the challenges that fathers face now. You spoke about tears a bit earlier, and you kind of alluded to some of the things and challenges you faced. But in terms of the research that you've been kind of working on, one of the examples that I might kind of be aware of is, there's this thing that's kind of said between guys is, man, women are not going to be attracted to me when I'm just a plain guy who goes to school, goes to work, and, I stay at home. They want the guys who are flashy. They want the guys who have it, right? They want the guys who have the popularity, So I can only imagine that for a father who's dealing with a daughter who's kind of attracted to that, is it ever too late to even intervene in a situation like that?
I look at being a dad to a son or a daughter is you're always in teaching mode. Always. You never stop teaching. You never stop giving, providing teachable moments, that you are always teaching, guiding in a spirit of love.
Yes, sir.
Always. I don't care if I'm when my children are with me, they know I'm always teaching. We could be driving down the street. There may be an incident that has happened and we see it on the news. I'm always teaching.
You've created the space for it, right? It's sort of like they probably even call you in certain moments like, man, Dad, I just saw this, what do you think? Or they're about to make a purchase of some sort or a big decision. They'll most likely contact you. There's a lady I had on the podcast, and, this was very, very interesting to hear. And more so since I spoke to you, I've also kind of been interested in that. Like, okay, well, how are these ladies who are, for lack of a better word, moving into powerful positions, right? What are their relationships with their fathers like? Because now we're talking about the empowered women or the boss women and all of that. And I see the sort of masculine effect in them. And I wonder, okay, how did the father sort of play a role in, making sure that the daughter can get to that level?
Man, that's a whole nother show right there, man. And let me just say that I think that there are a lot of people who are saying to women that you need to be a boss in all aspects of your life. You need to be a boss at work and you need to be a boss at home. I think that kind of mentality will create an environment where women will end up being by themselves.
Sure.
I think most men are looking for a partnership. A partner to help them raise family, do great things in the community, a partnership. Like I don't need to be a boss in my house. It's a partnership, man. And so
sure.
even for men got to get out of this notion and thinking, see, you can be, as a man, you can be, because I believe the man is supposed to be the head of the household. You can be head of the household, but the way in which you interact with your wife and the way you interact with your wife or significant other is that we're partners. I'm the head of the household because I believe that that's the way that God intended it. But I don't make major decisions. Like I don't go out and buy a car without asking. Right? I don't plan a vacation for the family without telling you, this is what I'm thinking we should do. What are your thoughts?
Right.
And it would be the same thing as a woman. Just because you make a whole lot of money at your job, you don't nobody wants you coming up in here just telling somebody what we gonna do. No.
It doesn't work like that. Huh?
No, it's gonna cause problems.
And you're seeing that. I mean, we're seeing those problems in, we might say that divorce rates are caused by that. But also at the same time, I think it's more so, not defining our roles, man. No one kind of goes into, let me not say no one. I'm sure there's a huge number of people who plan that, but it seems like the ones that do lose out don't go in with that mentality of, okay, well, how are we going to make this partnership work for us, right? Because then that's going to have an impact on whoever we raise or we bring into this world, you know?
Yeah, and it's a partnership, man. But once again, man, we got to start with our daughters. We got to start having conversations with them. Dads got to start having conversations with their daughters about relationships and being honest and transparent, particularly as they get older, about the mistakes that they've made. You know, I dated this particular woman. It didn't work out, you know, because of this, or in situations where dad and mom are not together. You don't have to tell your daughter everything, but it didn't work out between you and your mom because I wanted to do these things. She wanted to do something different, and we couldn't work it out.
That's definitely sort of some vulnerability there. I think that, you know, you leaning in with that, it also opens them up to be like, oh man, you know, dad said that, right? It's kind of shocking at first, but it's like, man, okay, I can share a little bit more with my father. But then, you know, it gets awkward when it's something sexual then, you know. I've spoken with, and I'm very careful not to mention any names here, but I've spoken to a few ladies who've experienced some kind of sexual abuse, sexual trauma of sorts. And, you know, it's weird when you hear them talk about it it's like, man, I haven't really told anyone. Right? I couldn't even tell my parents. Then you grow up carrying all these secrets, then that sort of impacts on your life, because then you become a people pleaser because you don't want, you know, to sort of rock the boat. You know, you want to keep the peace at all times because you don't also want to be found out that, hey, man, this thing happened to me. So when it comes to those sort of things that have to do with sex, how can we then, you know, create that space?
Early. Gotta start the conversations early. It's got to be age appropriate. What's good touch? What's bad touch? Talking to your daughters, particularly when they're younger, about what to do. Like if like, you know, like even like when my daughters were about 8 or 9, they would go in the bathroom by themselves, but I would be at the door. But they always had in the back of their mind a set of instructions. You don't talk to nobody. If anybody says anything to you in the bathroom that's inappropriate, you start yelling. We gotta have these conversations as dads with our daughters when they're younger, and the conversations need to be age appropriate and reinforced when they get older. Like I just wrote, I don't know if I sent you the blog I wrote about preparing our daughters when they go to college. Did I send that to you?
No, I don't think I got that.
And the article is about the conversations that I had with my daughter about rape and sexual assault on college campuses and things that she could do and things that other dads. It's on Dear Father's website, but I'll send it to you.
Okay, cool. We'll also attach that to the show notes. So, you know, yeah, if you got a daughter who's out in college now, man, I think it'll be beneficial for you to read that, and maybe you guys read it together, right? Share that, have a discussion, and I think that's also one of the good ways to bridge that gap, right? Is maybe you don't have the tools, you don't know how to have those conversations. It feels a bit awkward, man. There's some good articles out there. I know you've written quite a lot, Mr. Miller, that men can read and sort of use those as those icebreakers, so to speak, between them and their daughters, or within the family for that matter. But more so, I think that the other thing that I also wanted to ask you was, how was your relationship with your own father? And do you have any sisters in your family?
So no sisters. I actually take care of my dad now. He has dementia. So he's 84. So my life has come full circle. He raised me and now I'm taking care of him. And I'm actually doing going to be doing a book on caregivers, you know, people who are raising, and I just sent that article to you on WhatsApp, people who are raising taking care of their parents. And so for me, my fatherhood journey has become full circle because now I'm taking care of my dad who took care of me.
Okay, so what I wanted to check there was, if you had any experience. I mean, most times it seems like the things that we didn't have, I guess, so to speak, with my lack of a father, right? I then went into the space of exploring issues that men face, for example. So I guess not to say that you then, didn't have sisters, so you went to go look for how fathers are raising daughters, but then your life just kind of sort of moved you in that direction. So I wonder, for anyone who's listening, do you ever pay attention to those sort of small details in your life and kind of link that to the work that you do? Maybe not so much the 9 to 5, but more of the community-oriented work, right? Yeah. The selfless work that you do. Yeah.
Yeah. There are serious connections that I make every day that go back to how I was raised and how I was parented. My parents were married 50 years. But it wasn't until I got older that I realized that while my parents loved me, they placed more of a value on making sure that me and my brother got our education, that we learned the importance of hard work and values and doing chores. And, when we turned 16, getting jobs to teach us how to enter into the workforce. But there wasn't the kind of love. There wasn't more of a focus on love and affection that there should have been. And that's something that I think about all the time. The ways in which we come into this world as children and our interactions with our parents, whether you raised by dad or mom and dad or mom and dad and grandmom, speak volumes to how we show up in the world as we get older in relationships, what we will tolerate, what we won't tolerate. It shows up in how we do business and our careers. And so for dads, man, it's super important to go back to your childhood, man. No matter how difficult it may have been. A lot of times childhood can be difficult because one or both of your parents may have been absent. But you really got to go, if you really want to reach what I call optimal manhood, the highest expression of manhood and masculinity, you got to spend a lot of time going back to your childhood, man.
There's a gentleman, he's probably in his 50s. I think he's about 55, maybe 56 this year. And he, we have this men's group, and we do a lot of, we speak a lot around mental health. And one of the things that we did for him when I first spoke to him, I asked him, well, tell me about your childhood, man. And we had a very big, robust conversation around that. And he's done quite a lot of work on himself around that, how his childhood has kind of impacted where he landed up. And he often speaks about that, man, KG, man, I thank you so much for reminding me about doing that inner child healing, right? That's kind of the term that we use for that. And by going back there, then I can see how, my relationship, how I'm impacting on my daughters, how I'm impacting on how I'm showing up for my wife at home, how all of that is entrenched in this child that I've kind of ignored and neglected for so long. And maybe some people, because like you say, the pain, of remembering what happened in your childhood kind of keeps you from wanting to explore that. Yeah.
And I always say, man, therapy is critically important for men of African descent, man, because of our journey. Whether you're here or in South Africa and other countries, there's just have been many things that have happened to us along the way that therapy and a strong mental health professional can really help us relive those demons from our childhood.
Yes, sir. Man, Mr. Miller, I have this question that I ask. I think I've asked every guest, but I try to remember that sometimes it slips my mind. But we've shared such a lovely exchange. But I want to hear from you if there's one action, one word or whatever, is something that one or each man can do for themselves or to better a community or to better someone else's life. Yeah, what would that be for you? And I know you've given it quite a few times, but I wonder if you have something else in mind.
I would say forgiveness, man, because a lot of times we're carrying this baggage, man. I mean, it's like having a huge sack on our back because our dad may not have been there. What you'll find in the U.S. is there's a rising number of single dads. So a lot of times children are mad at their mothers because their mothers left home. For men, we got to get out of the blame game. Even blaming your ex.
Yes, sir.
If it ain't work out, it ain't work out.
Man.
Do the healing work that you need, forgive, and move on. Because being angry at your child's mother is just gonna weigh you down, man.
Man.
You can forgive and not forget. You can forgive and not like. You can forgive your child's mother for what she's done to you. You ain't gotta like her, but you can forgive her to the point where you can always be respectful and kind. You ain't gotta like her. It's powerful, man, being able to forgive, man. Again, you may never forget. There are things that people have done to me that I will never forget, but I've forgiven them. Man. And that's so important as a dad, and that's teachable. That's transferable. You can teach your children that, man.
Let's get out of the blame game, fellas, man. And Mr. Miller, man, do you have any last words you want to drop? Anything you want to share? Any projects that are coming up? Any webinars that the men can attend?
Would love to connect with you. And I'm connected to a whole bunch of men's groups, fatherhood stuff, circles. Would love to connect with you. If there are any conferences that you guys may be doing in South Africa, would love to come back. I had such a great time spending time in South Africa because I'd been to Africa 11 other times, mostly West Africa. Yeah. So really enjoyed my experience and then connecting with you.
Yes, sir.
Like if you guys are doing any men's circles, no matter what time they are, I know there's a time difference, but I don't really sleep. So it doesn't really matter. I can join in, man, but would love to continue the conversation and hope to maybe even come back and would love to do some interviews of dads in South Africa, man, to really kind of compare and contrast their experiences in South Africa to Black fathers in the U.S.
Yes, sir. Oh, I love that idea because there's, I found that maybe not so similar, but there's so many cross points, right? Or touch points between the experiences that we have. Yeah. And we can learn so much more from each other. I think the one thing that you had said to me was, in terms of research and the work that you've done in the States, you're a little bit more further down the line, more than us here, But there are organizations, like I'm saying, in SA who've done a lot of work.
Like I'm working on an op-ed around Black men and mental health for one of the larger newspapers here in the U.S. I should finish that over the weekend, and I'll send it to you as well.
Yes, sir. Man, we're going to do a whole lot, man. So I hope you guys, wherever you're listening from, make sure that you check the links that we're going to be sharing, read some of this material. Like I said, man, I encourage you to use it as icebreakers, man. Start these conversations, whether maybe you've had them, more so if you haven't had these conversations, see what it means to you. Don't just take what we're saying here as like, this is gospel. We're talking about everything that every man does. But I think every man's got his own experience, and you can take learnings from other people and sort of apply them to yourself, to your situation. But this has been truly informative. I think it's my second time kind of having more of a full-length conversation with you. And man, every time I just get to learn so much more. And like I say, even though there's, I guess, an age difference, a gap, I just feel, very welcomed by you. And thank you for creating the space, man, to share with you.
Well, man, thank you, man, and we'll be in touch.
Yes, sir. Peace and
All right,
love,
brother.
family.
Have a good one, man.